Chapter 8. What Happened in the Laboratory. Algernon raised himself on his elbow and stared in horror at the gaping hole in the wall before him. It was a great circular hole with jagged edges, and through it the skyline of lower Manhattan glimmered nebulously, like an etching under glass. His temples throbbed painfully. His tongue was dry and swollen, and adhered to the roof of his mouth. Someone was standing above him, not Imbert, for Imbert wore spectacles, and this man's face was destitute of glitter, a blurred oval, faultlessly white. Confusedly, Algernon recalled that Little did not wear spectacles. This, then, was Little, not Imbert. It was coming back now. He had sought to convince Imbert that the machine wasn't a mechanical hypnotizer. He had turned it on, and then... Good God, what happened next? Something neither of them had anticipated. An explosion! But first, for an instant, they had seen the figure and the light, and he and Imbert had been too frightened to turn it off. How very clear it was all becoming. They had stood for an instant facing the wall, too utterly bewildered to turn off the light. And then Little had entered the room, and he had shouted a warning, a frenzied warning. "Help me, please," exclaimed Algernon weakly. Little bent and gripped him by the shoulders. "Steady now," he commanded, as he guided him toward a chair. "You're not hurt. You'll be all right in a moment. Imbert, too, is all right. A piece of plaster struck him in the temple, gave him a nasty cut, but he'll be quite all right." "But what happened?" Algernon gestured helplessly toward the hole in the wall. "I remember that there was an explosion, and that you shouted at me, didn't you?" "Yes, I shouted for you to get back into the room. You were standing too close to the wall. Another instant, and the floor would have crumbled too, and you'd have had a nasty tumble, a tumble from which you wouldn't have recovered." He smiled grimly and patted Algernon on the shoulder. "Just try to calm down a bit. I'll get you a whiskey and soda." "But what precisely happened?" persisted Algernon. "The light decreased the wall's randomness, sent it back through time. I warned you that the wall would crumble if the light rested upon it for more than an instant, but you had to experiment." "I'm sorry," muttered Algernon shamefacedly. "I fear I've ruined your apartment." "Not important, really. It's eerie, of course, having all one's secrets open to the sky, but my landlord will rectify that." He gazed at Algernon curiously. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "To convince Imbert. He said the machine was merely a mechanical hypnotizer." "I see. Imbert thought I was rather pathetically touched." "Not exactly. I think he wanted to believe you." "But couldn't. Well, I can't blame him. 5 years ago I would have doubted too, laughed all this to scorn. I approve of skeptics. They're dependable when you've succeeded in convincing them that unthinkable and outrageous things occasionally have at least a pragmatic potency. I doubt if even now Imbert would concede that this is an entropy-reversing machine, but you may be sure his respect for it has grown. He'll follow my instructions now without hesitation, and I want you to. We must act in unison, or we'll be defeated before we start." Algernon began suddenly to tremble. "We haven't an instant to lose," he exclaimed. "I got in touch with the police just before you came back. They're sending out ambulance calls from all over the city. Chagnar has begun to slay." Algernon had risen and was striding toward the door. "Wait!" Little's voice held a note of command. "We've got to wait for Imbert. He's downstairs in the bathroom, dressing his wound." Reluctantly, Algernon returned into the room. "A few minutes' delay won't matter," continued Little, his voice surprisingly calm. "We've such a hideous ordeal before us that we should be grateful for this respite." "But Chognor is killing now," protested Algernon, "and we are sitting here letting more lives—" "Be snuffed out? Perhaps. But at the same instant, all over the world, other lives are being snuffed out by diseases which men could prevent if they energetically bestirred themselves." He drew a deep breath. "We're doing the best we can, man. This respite is necessary for our nerves' sake. Try to view the situation sanely. If we are going to eradicate the malignancy which is Chognor Fawn, we'll need a surgeon's calm. We've got to steel our wills, extrude from our minds all hysterical considerations and all sentiment." "But it will kill thousands," protested Algernon, "in the streets." "No." Little shook his head. "It's no longer in the streets. It has left the city." "How do you know?" "There has been a massacre on the Jersey coast, near Asbury Park. I stopped for an instant in the Brooklyn Standard office on my way up from the garage. The night staff's in turmoil. They're rushing through a sensational morning extra. I found out something else. There's been a similar massacre in Spain. If we hadn't been talking here, we'd have known. All the papers ran columns about it, hours ago. They're correlating the dispatches now, and by tomorrow everyone will know of the menace. What I fear is mass hysteria." "Mass hysteria?" "Yes, they'll go mad in the city tomorrow. There'll be a stampede. Unreasoning superstition and blind terror always culminate in acts of violence. Hundreds of people will run amok, pillage, destroy. There'll be more lives lost than Chognor destroyed tonight." "But we can do something. We must." "I said that we were merely waiting for Dr. Imbert." Little crossed to the eastern window and stared for a moment into the lightening sky. Then he returned to where Algernon was standing. "Do you feel better?" he asked. "Have you pulled yourself together?" "Yes," muttered Algernon. "I'm quite all right." "Good." The door opened and Imbert came in. His face was distraught and of a deathly pallor, but a look of relief came into his eyes when they rested on Algernon. "I feared you were seriously hurt," he cried. "We were quite mad to experiment with that thing." "We must experiment again, I fear." Imbert nodded. "I'm ready to join you. What do you want us to do?" "I want you and Harris to carry that machine downstairs and put it into my car. I'll need a flashlight and a few other things. I won't be long."